The majority of false arrest complaints in American retail are filed by black customers. But for one security guard, that statistic became a catastrophic personal mistake the moment he put his hands on a 16-year-old boy. Because the father shopping beside him, now watching his son be forced to the ground, was the state attorney general, and he had been there the entire time. This is the story of Michael and his son, Jordan. It's about a routine shopping trip that exploded into a national conversation on power, profiling, and protection. When the man tasked with upholding a state's laws watches those laws break his own child, what does justice look like? And for the guard who made the assumption, the consequences were only just beginning to unfold. Michael Rhodes wasn't just any father. As the state's first black attorney general, his entire career was built on dismantling systemic bias within the justice system. That Saturday, he was just dad, promising his son Jordan a new pair of sneakers after a winning basketball season. 16-year-old Jordan Rhodes was a straight-A student, a point guard with a college scout's interest, and like most teens, perpetually attached to his phone. He'd saved his allowance for months, eyeing a specific limited edition release. The Springfield Galleria, a sprawling mid-tier mall 30 minutes from their home, was the only store within 100 miles that had them in stock. The Galleria had a history. 5 years prior, it settled a class-action lawsuit for $350,000 after multiple black and Latino teens alleged wrongful detention and aggressive searches by its contracted security firm, Sentinel Shield. The settlement mandated new anti-bias training, but a former Sentinel HR manager, in a later deposition, would call that training a, quote, check-the-box video that most guards slept through. Ben Carter, 32, was one of those guards. A former Marine with an honorable discharge, he'd been with Sentinel for 18 months. His personnel file noted a solid record, but also 2 written customer complaints. Both were dismissed internally as customer dissatisfaction, lacking follow-up. One complaint, filed by a black woman in her 50s, stated Carter had followed her through 3 stores before demanding to check her bag. She left in tears. Sentinel's policy allowed guards to detain someone based on reasonable suspicion. The definition of reasonable was left almost entirely to the guard's discretion. For Michael Rhodes, the mall trip was a rare pause. His office was currently investigating 3 separate police departments for patterns of discriminatory stops. He just closed a major case against a county sheriff for racially targeted parole violations. The work was relentless. This afternoon was a sanctuary. Jordan tried on the sneakers, the bold red and black design instantly winning him over. Michael watched, a faint smile breaking his usual stern focus. He pulled out his wallet, the American flag pin on his lapel catching the fluorescent store light. It was a gift from his own father, a former civil rights attorney. The pin was a reminder, he often told Jordan, of who the law was supposed to serve. At that same moment, Ben Carter was 15 stores down, near the food court. His supervisor's morning briefing had included a vague alert about increased theft activity involving teens in hoodies. No specific descriptions, no surveillance footage, just a warning. Carter's patrol route took him past the sporting goods store's entrance twice. The first time, he saw a group of white teens laughing by the hats. He nodded and moved on. The second time, his gaze passed over Michael and Jordan. His eyes lingered on Jordan's varsity hoodie, his hands in his pockets, his focused expression as he looked at the shoes. In his training, a module called Behavioral Indicators listed avoiding eye contact and appearing overly focused on merchandise as potential red flags. Jordan was simply deciding if he liked the shoes. Michael paid with a credit card, the transaction smooth. The clerk placed the sneakers in a distinctive bright yellow bag. Father and son exited, turning toward the main corridor. Jordan, buzzing with excitement, pulled the box out to look again as they walked. This was the moment. Ben Carter, from his angle, saw a black teen in a hoodie holding merchandise outside a store without a visible receipt. The yellow bag was in Michael's hand, slightly behind Jordan, obscured by other shoppers. Carter's decision-making process, as he would later describe it, took less than 3 seconds. He saw the action, referenced the morning's generic warning, and moved. He did not see the man in the tailored suit walking beside the teen. He did not see the American flag pin. He saw only what he had been primed, however subconsciously, to see. The system at that moment was a set of disconnected dots, a settled lawsuit, a perfunctory training, a vague warning, a historical bias, and a guard empowered to act on a feeling. All of them were about to connect in a violent public collision. Carter closed the distance with practiced speed. He didn't announce himself from a distance. He didn't ask a question. He moved behind Jordan and grabbed him by the shoulder and the back of his hoodie. "All right, kid, stop right there. Let's see your receipt for those." Jordan's world exploded into shock and force. The box flew from his hands. Instinctively, he tensed, trying to turn and see who had him. Carter, interpreting the resistance as flight, drove his weight forward. The two of them stumbled, and Carter used his momentum to take Jordan down onto the hard tile floor, a knee pressing into his back. Michael Rhodes froze for one horrifying second. The sound was a parent's worst nightmare. His son's cry of pain and confusion, the thud of a body hitting the ground. Then, the professional and the paternal in him fused into something terrifyingly calm. He dropped the yellow bag. Every lawyerly instinct focused on evidence. His phone was in his hand, recording before his conscious mind even gave the command. The camera captured the scene. His son pinned, the guard's face flushed with effort, shoppers stopping to stare. Then Michael spoke, his voice not a shout but a clear, cold blade cutting through the mall's noise. "Get your hands off my son, right now." Ben Carter looked up, and for the first time he saw the father. He saw the suit. He saw the phone recording him, and his eyes dropped to the American flag pin on the man's lapel, a symbol of authority he immediately recognized. The blood drained from his face. His grip loosened just slightly. He was no longer looking at a suspected shoplifter. He was looking at the end of his career, and he had no idea just how deep the consequences would run. Because Michael Rhodes wasn't just recording for evidence. He was recording for the case he was about to open, not just against one guard, but against the entire system that put him there. And the first thing he would do before he even helped Jordan to his feet was call his chief deputy with 7 words that would send shockwaves through the state. Initiate Protocol Gamma. Target Sentinel Shield. Now. Protocol Gamma was a contingency Michael Rhodes hoped he'd never use. A classified directive within the Attorney General's office. It unlocked a suite of powers typically reserved for organized crime or systemic corruption. Immediate subpoena authority, forensic audit teams, and a dedicated hotline for witness testimony. Its target was never a person, but an ecosystem. In the mall corridor, time fractured. Michael's call lasted 20 seconds. Then he knelt, his hand on Jordan's shoulder, his voice low and steady. "Breathe, son. Look at me. You're safe." Jordan's eyes were wide with shock, his cheek pressed against the cold floor. Ben Carter had staggered back, his hands raised in a gesture of surrender that was 5 seconds too late. Shoppers' phones were now a constellation of recording lights. Mall management arrived first, a nervous assistant manager who took one look at Michael's identification and went pale. Then, 2 uniformed police officers responded to a reported assault. The older officer, a veteran with 20 years on the force, recognized the Attorney General immediately. The dynamic in the corridor inverted. The officer's attention shifted from the teen on the ground to the guard who had put him there. Ben Carter was read his rights not for shoplifting but for unlawful detention and assault. The sporting goods clerk ran over, waving the printed receipt. He paid. His father paid right in front of me. The bright yellow bag, forgotten on the floor, became a damning exhibit. Carter was escorted out, not in handcuffs but suspended, his future evaporating with every step. But for Michael, this was the beginning, not the end. He declined immediate medical attention for Jordan, whose physical injuries were minor scrapes. The deeper injury was in his son's silence during the drive home. The excited teen who had left the house was gone, replaced by a withdrawn stranger staring out the window. By the time they walked through their front door, the machinery of the state was already in motion. In a secure operations center 300 miles away, a team of 12 attorneys and investigators watched the raw footage from Michael's phone. Protocol Gamma was not about one incident. It was about proving a pattern. Their first subpoena, issued within the hour, was not to Sentinel Shield, but to the Springfield Galleria itself. Every internal security report, every complaint filed against Sentinel guards, and every piece of correspondence between mall management and the security firm for the past 7 years. The second subpoena went to Sentinel Shield's corporate headquarters. It demanded all training materials, personnel files for every guard employed at the Galleria, and most critically, the complete database of all customer detentions and use of force incidents across the state for the past decade. Sentinel Shield's legal department, a boutique firm known for aggressively defending police departments, was caught flat-footed. They expected a civil lawsuit, a demand for a settlement. They did not expect a state-level prosecutorial blitzkrieg. Their initial response, issued that evening, was a masterpiece of corporate deflection. Sentinel Shield takes all allegations seriously. We are conducting an internal review and will fully cooperate with authorities. We cannot comment further on an active personnel matter. Behind the scenes, panic was setting in. The CEO, a former police commissioner named David Vance, held an emergency board call. He had built Sentinel on contracts with municipalities and private properties that wanted a law and order image. A systemic discrimination probe by the Attorney General wasn't a lawsuit. It was an existential threat. Vance's strategy was twofold: contain the guard, Ben Carter, as a lone bad apple, and dig for anything that could discredit the Rhodes family. Meanwhile, the viral spread was uncontrollable. By 8 p.m., the hashtag #ShoppingWhileBlack was trending nationally. The video was raw, shaky, and utterly compelling. It showed the tackle, the pinning, Michael's icy command, and Carter's face dawning with horror. News outlets scrambled to verify the story. At 9:15, a major network aired the clip with a chyron that read, "AG's son assaulted by security, racial profiling incident." The story had everything: a powerful victim, a clear villain, and a terrifyingly common fear for Black families. Soon, the comments section became a flood of personal stories. A mother in Chicago wrote about her son being followed in a department store. A college student in Atlanta shared video of her own wrongful detention. The incident was a match thrown into a tinderbox of lived experience. Jordan tried to disappear. He deleted his social media apps, but his friends sent him screenshots of the debate raging about him. Some called him a hero. Others, in dark corners of the internet, accused him of playing the victim. The voicemail on his phone filled with requests from talk shows. His basketball coach found him sitting alone in the gym after practice, silently shooting free throws. "They look at me and see a thief," Jordan told him, the ball bouncing away. "That's all they see." Michael and his wife, Dr. Lauren Rhodes, a pediatrician, argued in hushed tones that night. Lauren's medical mind saw the trauma symptoms in their son: the insomnia, the loss of appetite, the hypervigilance. "He needs to be our priority right now, not a symbol," she urged. Michael, gripping the back of a kitchen chair, saw the larger battlefield. "If I don't do this, Lauren, it just happens to the next kid and the next, and their parents don't have a voice. Jordan's pain has to mean something." The investigation's first breakthrough came from an unlikely source: the Galleria's own security server. Under the subpoena, the mall had to turn over all footage from every camera in the wing for the entire day. A junior analyst in the AG's office, cross-referencing timestamps, found a critical angle. A camera above the sporting goods store's entrance had captured Ben Carter's entire patrol. They watched him pass the group of white teens without a second glance. They watched him pause, turn, and focus solely on Jordan from the moment he left the store. They watched the approach, the grab, the takedown. It was a visual map of bias in action. But the real pivot came 2 days later, from the data dump on Sentinel's detentions. The raw numbers were staggering. In the past 3 years, Sentinel guards across the state had filed over 2,000 theft detention reports. The AG's data team, led by a brilliant statistician named Anya Chen, ran the numbers against census data for the zip codes where each mall was located. The correlation was undeniable and damning. In shopping districts with a black population of over 20%, Sentinel's detention rate was 470% higher than in districts with a black population under 5%. The success rate, actual prosecutions or recovered merchandise, was 22% lower in the black majority districts. They were stopping more people, with less cause, and finding less evidence of crime. This wasn't anecdotal. It was statistical proof of a predatory business model. David Vance's bad apple defense was crumbling before a harvest of rotten data. Then the whistleblower called. The tip came into the Gamma hotline from a blocked number. The voice, male, nervous, claimed to be a former Sentinel middle manager. He said 2 things that made the lead attorney, Cassandra Wright, sit bolt upright. First, that Sentinel's official use of force logs were systematically edited to remove complaints before being submitted to clients. And second, that the anti-bias training was a farce. Guards were instead incentivized with monthly detention quotas and bonuses for high-value recoveries, pressure that explicitly encouraged aggressive, speculative stops. Cassandra had her team pull the employment records for every Sentinel supervisor. They found a name that matched the voice's limited description. Mark Rinaldi, former operations manager for the Northern region, fired 6 months prior for budgetary reasons. His severance agreement had a standard non-disclosure clause. They tracked him to a new job in another state. When 2 agents from the AG's office knocked on his door, he initially refused to talk. Then they showed him the preliminary data on the racial disparity. He looked at the charts, closed his eyes, and said, "The quota was 10 detentions a month. We called it getting your 10. If you didn't get them, your hours got cut." He agreed to testify. He also handed over a personal hard drive containing drafts of internal reports that had been sanitized, with the original, complaint-filled version still intact. The scale of the cover-up was now visible. Back at Sentinel, David Vance made his move. His lawyers filed an aggressive motion to block the AG's subpoenas, claiming they were an overreach and politically motivated. They also, in a sealed deposition, hinted they had information about Jordan Rhodes that could contextualize the guards' actions. It was a threat thinly veiled. Michael Rhodes read the legal filing in his office, the sunset casting long shadows. He knew this play: attack the victim, dig into school records, social media, anything to suggest Jordan was somehow culpable. It was the oldest trick in the book. He felt a cold fury settle in his bones. They were coming for his son again, this time with paper instead of knees. He called Cassandra Wright. "They want to play hardball. We change tactics. We don't just subpoena their records. We subpoena their bank records. Follow the money. Who profits from this quota system? Which malls are paying for this? And I want a press conference tomorrow. We take the data public." The battle lines were now drawn. On one side, a powerful corporation with everything to lose and a willingness to attack a traumatized teenager. On the other, a father with the resources of the state and a mountain of evidence. But as Michael prepared to step in front of the cameras, a new email arrived in Cassandra's inbox. It was from the whistleblower tip line, containing a single, ominous sentence and a file attachment. The sentence read, "You think the quotas are bad? Look what they did in Oakwood Mall last year." The file was a security video, time-stamped 13 months prior. It showed a different guard in a different Sentinel uniform pinning a black woman to the ground in a parking garage. This incident had never been reported, and the woman in the video was now coming forward. Her name was Alicia Johnson, and she was ready to talk. The lone incident was about to become a chorus. Alicia Johnson's story was a bomb waiting to detonate. A 34-year-old social worker, She had been shopping for a birthday gift at Oakwood Mall when a Sentinel guard accused her of stealing a wallet she'd never touched. When she refused to be searched, he forced her to the concrete. Her injuries were worse than Jordan's: a dislocated shoulder, facial abrasions, and a concussion. But the real damage was the cover-up. The mall, fearing liability, had pressured her to accept a $25,000 settlement with a strict non-disclosure agreement. Sentinel had fired the guard, labeling him another rogue employee, and scrubbed the incident from their official logs. Alicia had taken the money. Her medical bills were staggering, but the shame and fear never left. Seeing Jordan Rhodes on the news broke her silence. Her testimony changed everything. It moved the case from statistics to a repeatable, violent pattern. Cassandra Wright had her sit with a forensic artist to identify the guard from Sentinel's roster. It was Ben Carter's former training officer. The connection was no longer abstract. This was a culture passed down. Michael held the press conference. Flanked by charts showing Sentinel's racially skewed detention data, he spoke not as a politician, but as a father. This is not about one mistake. It is about a business model that profits from the presumption of guilt based on skin color. He announced a civil rights investigation into Sentinel Shield and all its client properties. He did not mention Alicia Johnson by name, citing an ongoing investigation, but her sealed affidavit was already attached to a new wave of subpoenas. Sentinel's legal counterattack landed the next morning. In a dramatic legal filing, they motioned to have Michael Rhodes removed from the case for blatant conflict of interest and using state resources to settle a personal grievance. Then, they played their card. Attached as an exhibit was a single page from Jordan's middle school disciplinary record from 3 years prior. It documented a single incident where Jordan, then 13, was caught with a classmate's missing calculator in his locker. He claimed he'd borrowed it without asking. The teacher marked it as theft. The matter was resolved with a parent-teacher conference and detention. In the hands of Sentinel's lawyers, this became a documented history of dishonest behavior. Their argument was insidious. The guard's suspicion, while regrettably forceful, was not wholly unfounded given the subject's proclivities. They were putting Jordan on trial. The Rhodes family home became a fortress under siege. News vans camped outside. Lauren Rhodes took a leave of absence from her clinic. Jordan, seeing his old mistakes smeared across legal documents and gossip sites, retreated to his room, the trauma now compounded by a vicious public shamming. Michael's fury was volcanic, but it was laced with a father's guilt. He had brought this scrutiny upon his son. The legal battle was now a street fight in the mud. But then, the wait it gets worse moment arrived. It came from two directions at once. First, from the paramedic who had treated Alicia Johnson in the Oakwood Mall parking lot. He'd been disturbed by the incident but assumed it was handled. Seeing the news, he contacted the AG's hotline. In his sworn statement, he recalled the Sentinel supervisor on scene not asking about Alicia's injuries, but repeatedly asking the paramedic, "How do we make this go away?" The supervisor had then taken a call, turning away and saying, "Yeah, I'll contain it. The Vance Protocol." He'd assumed it was a name. The AG's investigators knew it was a mandate. David Vance's containment protocol was the second and far larger revelation. While the legal teams dueled, Anya Chen's data miners, now with subpoena power over Sentinel's financials, followed the money. They traced anomalous bonus payments not just to guards for detention quotas, but to a shell company called Metroplex Risk Solutions. Metroplex's sole director was David Vance's brother-in-law. Its only visible income was quarterly wire transfers from Sentinel Shield, totaling over $2 million in 3 years. What did Metroplex do? It appeared to be a black box. Then, a forensic accountant found a link. Metroplex shared a server with a small, now-defunct private investigation firm. That firm had been hired in the past to conduct pre-employment background checks for Sentinel, but the dates didn't match. They were running deep dig background checks on people after they had filed complaints against Sentinel guards. Sentinel wasn't just intimidating whistleblowers from within. They were weaponizing private investigators to find dirt on victims, to silence them with leverage. Alicia Johnson had been lucky. They'd found nothing on her. But other complainants had quietly withdrawn after Sentinel's lawyers mysteriously referenced personal details, an old debt, a sealed juvenile record, in settlement discussions. The system was not just biased, it was predatory and vindictive. It targeted people twice, first with their guards, then with their investigators. The final piece fell into place from a source no one expected: Ben Carter's ex-wife. She reached out to a victims advocacy group that had sprung up around the case. She didn't want to defend him, she said, but to explain the pressure he was under. In a recorded interview, she described a man crumbling under Vance's performance metrics. He came home stressed every day, saying he needed 2 more stops to make his bonus, or his shift would get cut. He said the training videos told them to look for nervous behavior, but his supervisor just pointed at kids in certain neighborhoods and said, "That's your quota right there." He became someone I didn't recognize. Carter, facing criminal charges and abandoned by his employer, was now a broken figure. His bad apple defense had been a shield for Sentinel, and they had thrown him away the moment it cracked. His testimony, if he chose to give it, could be devastating. David Vance, sensing the walls closing in, made one final desperate move. He called for a private mediation. His offer, conveyed through his slickest lawyer, a man named Leland Croft, was staggering. Sentinel would admit to systemic training failures, pay a $10 million settlement to a fund for victims, implement truly independent oversight, and drop all motions against the AG's office. In exchange, the criminal investigations into the company and its executives would end. Ben Carter would be the sole fall guy. It was a corporate king's ransom designed to make the problem disappear. Leland Croft presented it over sparkling water in a soundproofed conference room. "Michael, this ends the nightmare for your son. It delivers justice for every other victim with real money. You become the hero who reformed an industry. Everyone wins." Michael sat across from him, silent. The offer was politically tempting. It was a clean, victorious headline, but it left the architect, David Vance, wealthy and in power, free to rebuild his model elsewhere under a new name. It traded justice for Jordan for a paycheck for everyone else. That night, Michael stood in Jordan's doorway. His son was packing a duffel bag. "I'm going to stay with Grandma for a while," Jordan said, not looking up. I can't breathe here." Michael knew then that there was no deal to be made. A settlement was just another form of silence. He called Cassandra Wright. "We decline. We go to trial. We take Vance down." Leland Croft's response, when informed, was a single, icy sentence: "You have no idea what you're waking up." The next morning, Cassandra's office received an encrypted file, anonymously uploaded. It contained internal Sentinel emails from David Vance's account. They weren't about security protocols. They were political fundraising emails sent to a list of powerful donors and lobbyists. The subject line: "Protecting pro-business policing." In them, Vance boasted about Sentinel's efficacy in keeping high-risk demographics in check for their retail clients. He referred to the state's proposed Police Accountability Act as a disaster that would handcuff the good guys. The largest recipient on the list: a political action committee chaired by State Senator Ron Griggs, the man who had single-handedly stalled the Police Accountability Act in committee for the past 2 years. The corruption had tentacles that reached into the heart of the state legislature. Sentinel wasn't just a security firm. It was a political instrument fighting against the very reforms Michael championed. The attack on Jordan wasn't just a tragic mistake in a vacuum. It was the violent, logical endpoint of a system that Michael's political enemies were being paid to protect. The case was no longer about a mall, a guard, or a father's rage. It was a war for the soul of the state's justice system, and Michael Rhodes now had the evidence to prove it. But first, he had to walk into the lion's den. the Senate hearing where Senator Griggs was preparing to kill the Accountability Act for good. Michael had just been invited to testify. He was going to enter that chamber not just as the Attorney General, but as a witness to what the system he was trying to fix had done to his own family. The gavel was about to fall, and the whole state would be watching. The state Senate chamber was built to intimidate. 30 feet of marble ceilings, dark wood paneling, and a semicircle of elevated desks that looked down on the witness table. As Michael Rhodes walked to his seat, every eye followed him, including those of Senator Ron Griggs, who stared with the cold confidence of a man who controlled the gavel. Michael had rejected the traditional opening statement. Instead, he asked the committee clerk to enter Exhibit A into the record, the 47-second video from the mall. On monitors throughout the chamber, Jordan was tackled, pinned, and silenced. The room, filled with lobbyists and staff, went completely still. For the first time, the abstract debate about policing protocols had a face, a father's voice, and a child's fear. Senator Griggs attempted to regain control. Attorney General, while tragic, this isolated incident hardly justifies dismantling proven security frameworks that keep our citizens safe. It wasn't isolated, Michael interrupted, his voice calm but carrying. With your permission, Mr. Chairman, Exhibit B, the screen switched to Anya Chen's data visualization, the map of the state blooming with red dots where Sentinel's detentions clustered in black and brown neighborhoods. These are 2,314 isolated incidents over 3 years. This is the system you are defending. Griggs flushed. This committee will not be lectured by. Then let's discuss the financial incentives that created this system. Exhibit C. The screens now showed the wire transfers from Sentinel to Metroplex Risk Solutions and the linked background checks on complainants. This isn't security. This is a protection racket for a business model built on profiling. A junior senator from the opposing party leaned into her microphone. Mr. Rhodes, are you alleging that Sentinel Shield engaged in witness intimidation? I am. And I am alleging that this committee's chairman, Senator Griggs, received substantial political donations from a PAC funded by Sentinel's CEO, David Vance, while deliberately stalling the Police Accountability Act that would have prevented what happened to my son. The chamber erupted. Griggs slammed his gavel, shouting over the noise about baseless smears, but the evidence was already public. Cassandra Wright had leaked the fundraising emails to 3 major newspapers an hour before the hearing. Headlines were hitting phones in the room, ties between security firm and stalled reform. The hearing collapsed into procedural chaos, but the battle was won in the court of public opinion. By the end of the day, 5 senators withdrew their support for Griggs's blockade. The Police Accountability Act, dormant for 18 months, was discharged from committee and scheduled for a full vote. The legal dominoes fell fast. With the political cover gone, the Federal Department of Justice opened a pattern or practice investigation into Sentinel Shield. The state's evidence was handed over. David Vance was indicted on 12 counts, including conspiracy to violate civil rights, wire fraud, and witness tampering. He resigned and was later sentenced to 8 years in federal prison. Sentinel Shield declared bankruptcy. Its assets were sold off. The civil settlement, now without Vance to fight it, was monumental, a $50 million victim compensation fund, overseen by an independent monitor. Alicia Johnson became its first public beneficiary, receiving not just compensation, but a formal apology from the court. Ben Carter pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault. At his sentencing, he read a statement directly to Jordan, who watched via video link. I was trained to see a threat. I was wrong. I am sorry. The judge, citing his cooperation with the broader investigation and his status as a pawn in Vance's system, sentenced him to 2 years probation, 300 hours of community service, and mandated he complete a restorative justice program. He now works with that same program, speaking to new security guards about bias and de-escalation. For Jordan, justice was slower. He spent the summer with his grandmother away from the spotlight. He began therapy. The panic attacks lessened. In the fall, he returned to school and tentatively to the basketball court. His first game back, he missed his first 3 shots. Then he stole the ball, drove the length of the court, and scored. The crowd, knowing his story, rose in a standing ovation. He didn't smile, but he nodded. It was a start. Michael and Lauren Rhodes, their marriage strained but intact, established a nonprofit in Jordan's name dedicated to supporting kids traumatized by racial profiling and funding bias interruption training for security firms. The final, surprising detail emerged a year later, during the implementation of the new Accountability Act. A provision required all security firms to publish their detention data by demographics. A rookie analyst in the AG's office, reviewing the first quarterly reports, noticed something odd. One mid-sized firm, now under new management and reformed practices, had a perfect record: 0 disparity. Its CEO had been a mid-level manager at Sentinel who had tried to voice concerns about the quotas, was ignored, and quit. His name was Mark Rinaldi, the same whistleblower who had first exposed the quota system. He had used his severance and testimony to build something better. The system had not just been punished, it had been forced to regenerate, with the very people it had tried to silence leading the change. Michael Rhodes kept the American flag pin on his lapel, but he added a second pin next to it, a small, simple basketball, a reminder of why the fight mattered and who he was fighting for. The work wasn't over, but the foundation had been laid, not just in laws, but in the understanding that sometimes justice requires a father's love, a son's resilience, and the courage to turn a personal nightmare into a public reckoning. A year later, Jordan Rhodes still sometimes hesitates before walking into a store. The reflex is quiet, almost invisible, but it's there, a legacy written in a moment of violence on a mall floor. His story had a rare ending: a powerful father, a mountain of evidence, a systemic takedown. For every other family living with that same hesitation, the fight is often quieter, harder, and far less visible. The case of Sentinel Shield proved what researchers have documented for decades: that the majority of false arrest complaints in American retail are filed by Black customers. That 59% of Black Americans report being treated less fairly in stores. It proved that bias, when woven into business incentives and protected by political power, isn't an accident, it's a profitable system. But it also proved that system can be broken. The Police Accountability Act, now law, mandates independent oversight for all private security firms contracting with public spaces. The $50 million Victim Fund is actively processing claims, returning dignity alongside compensation. And the data publication rule means sunlight is now a permanent disinfectant. Every quarter, the numbers tell a story companies can no longer hide. The deeper change is harder to measure. It's in the conversations between parents and their children about what to do if they're ever stopped. It's in the revised training manuals that now emphasize de-escalation over detention quotas. It's in the understanding that a security guard's reasonable suspicion is not a divine instinct, but a reflection of the systems that trained him. Michael Rhodes still wears his 2 pins, the flag and the basketball. One represents the ideal he serves, the other the reason he serves it. He knows the work is never finished. For every Sentinel Shield that falls, another adapts. The fight against profiling is a continuous one, fought in legislative chambers, in corporate boardrooms, and in the quiet moments before a teenager pushes open a store door. This story started with a statistic and a tackle. It ends with a question: how many other systems operate on the same buried assumptions, the same perverse incentives, waiting for the right moment, the right victim, the right spark to bring them into the light? If you found this deep dive into power, justice, and the cost of an assumption compelling, make sure to subscribe. We're dedicated to uncovering the hidden architectures of the stories that shape our world. Your subscription helps us bring the next crucial narrative to the surface. Thanks for watching.